Hello, welcome to Spotlight on Wawarsing. I'm your host, If, and today's show features Adam Billingslea, Program Director for Mental Health Awareness at HealthAlliance Hospitals. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, If.
So, as of ACEs, what are adverse childhood experiences?
Well, thanks for asking.
You're welcome.
So adverse childhood experiences it's becoming a field of study, but essentially what it is during the adolescent phase of somebody's life, that's usually anywhere between the ages of 5 all the way into the late teens, even into the early 20s. If a young person is experiencing adversity, this adversity can be anything along the lines of perhaps a parent is incarcerated, there's food stress in the home, any types of abuse or negligence. These things essentially create barriers to a healthy development. And if these are compounded, which sometimes they are, multiple times, they have an even greater effect on later health in life. And that's both mental health and physical health. So there's a scale of 1 to 10 and they ask you a simple battery of questions. If your score is 3 or higher, you are, for example, I think 10 times more likely to experience diabetes. You're more likely to experience mental health disorders overall, hypertension, heart disease. So it's both medical and mental health that is affected by these adverse childhood experiences.
So, what impacts do these experiences on young people do, and what are the long-term outcomes?
Right. So those long-term outcomes, like I said, are often these mental health issues and these physical health issues. This can be problematic a lot of times because if this adverse childhood experience isn't mitigated, corrected, protected against, then often you have a less fruitful life, so to speak. So if you think about the fact that if you are developing a medical condition early on in life, or if you're developing a mental disorder, your ability to have a social life, to be able to maintain responsibilities becomes greatly impacted to the point where you may not be able to have a happy and productive life.
So, my paper says toxic stress, and what is toxic stress? How does it differ from regular stress?
Sure. So toxic stress is one of those things that it kind of coincides with adverse childhood experiences. So regular stress is something like what normal people experience every day. Maybe you're having a difficult exam coming up and you're studying a lot. Maybe you're having some issues on a sports team or something like that. That would be considered just regular stress. There's obstacles that are overcome. You can overcome them. They're achievable as far as goals are concerned. Toxic stress is where that stress is never really alleviated, or the obstacles are so insurmountable that you can't really overcome them. So toxic stress is, let's say maybe you're having a bad school day, but then you go home and you're dealing with these other adverse childhood experiences and you really don't get any type of relief. Maybe you're having difficulty having a normal sleep schedule or a unhealthy diet, and all of these things kind of just build up on top of each other, and what it would be, I guess, singly normal stress, when it's compounded with these other things and you don't really have any type of release, you don't have any type of way to kind of relax or de-stress, it becomes toxic, and that's what develops into these adverse childhood experiences, and there's lots of consequences because of that.
So, you could say that toxic stress is like a form of bottling up your emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's no way for you to release those emotions, if you are the kind of person who keeps it all bottled up inside, then yes, that is a great example. Sometimes it's really difficult to keep it bottled too, and it might end up being disruptive to your home life or to your school life. So it's definitely one of them.
As a protective factors, how can we reduce stress in a healthy way? What are some strategies youth people can use to ensure better mental health outcomes?
So there's a lot of different strategies, and I think for each person it's going to be a bit different. Maintaining kind of a regular routine or cycle as far as sleep is concerned, a healthy diet are some of the easy ones. Exercise is certainly important as well. Having productive and entertaining hobbies is a good one. A strong social life. Feeling close to at least one adult is one of those protective factors we talk about as well too. Somebody that you can confide in, that can be able to help guide you through maybe some of these more difficult times.
So, my paper has another type of stress, and it says positive stress. What is positive stress?
So that goes back to if toxic stress is stress that you can't overcome or you can't really get away from. Positive stress are these areas where you challenge yourself, but you're able to overcome them. Maybe you're, struggling on this test, but you study and you do really well on it, or you practice really hard and do well at whatever sports event that you are. And it can even be things, a lot of people disparage things like video games, but if it's in moderation and you are overcoming these various challenges that are coming up, that can be an example of positive stress. Sometimes it just feels good to accomplish something. So that's what I would say is a positive stressor.
And does exercising help with mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. So a physical release is certainly a way that you can alleviate some of this stress.
So, for finding help, there's often the perception that mental health illnesses are lifelong struggles with no end. Is recovery possible? What are some positive outcomes that could occur?
Yeah, sure. So I like to equate mental health with physical health, and the range of ailments that you can experience are just as varied as you would with physical health. So you might have a cold and it affects you for a certain amount of time, and then you recover. You might have a broken limb, you might have a broken leg, and you're put in a cast, and that might, it causes yourself to basically have a disability for a temporary amount of time, right? But you eventually recover from the cold, you recover from whatever broken limb that you have. There can be certainly lifelong illnesses, both medical and mental health, but for the most part, if they are treated, especially proactively early on in life, you see a significant decrease in the severity later on in life.
So, how can young people be supportive of a friend who may be struggling with their mental illnesses?
Sure. There's lots of ways that young people can help each other. And if anything, I do believe that young people probably are the best equipped when it comes to access to helping their friends. And one of the ways that they can do that is just to be able to listen non-judgmentally. It's not about giving advice to a person. Sometimes your friends might just need to vent. Just making sure that you're staying in touch with them, whether it's through social media or physically on a day-to-day basis if you see them regularly. Those are certainly some ways that you can help each other. If you feel like this person maybe needs to have some professional treatment, you can speak to an adult about it as well, or convince them to speak to an adult about it.
So, for youth mental health first aids, what is mental health first aid?
Sure. So the same way that we have physical first aid, we have CPR classes, there's classes that you can take that will basically educate yourself about the basics of mental health and what to do if any person in your life is experiencing any type of mental distress, and no matter how severe it is, you can make a difference in that person's life.
So, why is youth mental health so important as opposed to mental health of anyone else?
Right. So we've talked a little bit about adverse childhood experiences, and the effects that they have later on in life are of a greater impact. So if we are to address these issues when they're in their infancy, when a young person is going through these for the first time, and we really work to make sure that they have these protective factors, whether it's healthy hobbies or healthy activities or a strong social life or a strong support system, then a lot of these factors are less impactful later on in life. So it's just, if you want healthier outcomes, you have to address these things earlier. And for young people in particular, it's difficult because sometimes you may not have the language or the background that you're really totally aware of what's happening to your body or what's happening to your mind. So it's really important that the right people step in at the right time and are able to make a difference.
So, what are some of the mental health issues young people face today? And have you noticed any differences since back then when you were a child or as when your parents grew up?
Yeah. So every generation goes through different obstacles. Certainly things have changed since I was a young person with the advent of things like the internet, social media. There is this increased awareness, I guess, of your own appearance, of your social life, and there is more pressure put on young people, I believe, today, and that can increase things like anxiety. Being in a classroom for 8 hours a day is certainly a relatively new thing generationally. Maybe not from our grandparents, but certainly 100, 200 years ago, students weren't in classrooms for 8 hours a day. So you have a lot more of these kind of environmental factors that have changed the landscape for young people, especially when it comes to mental health development. You're expected to, instead of, do what's comfortable for you, you're expected to kind of just sit for 8 hours a day, do exactly what you're told, and that's sometimes difficult for people, especially if they're dealing with anxiety, if they're dealing with, maybe toxic stress at home, if they aren't getting enough sleep at night. It's difficult to do anything for 8 hours, So I think that certainly as, we progress, there is always going to be these obstacles, and there's always going to be new obstacles that young people will face. But I do hope that things like social media can be a tool that's used for good. And in the case of my grandparents, probably your grandparents as well, you didn't have the access to instant messengers or, social media. You had to either call somebody on the phone or write a letter. So you have that instant access with somebody else. And as long as you're using that connection for good, then it can be beneficial. Now, there obviously is caveats with that. There's cyberbullying and things. So tools can be either used for good or bad, and with modern technology we can use a lot more tools to make it a lot better.
So are you focusing your mental health first aid on people who work with adolescents and young adults?
Yeah. So thanks to a grant from actually the federal government, we've been able to administer this youth mental health first aid to youth-centric workforces. So that's school teachers, educators, people in the juvenile detention program, law enforcement officers, summer camp counselors, just anybody who has a relatively, they have a lot of interaction with young people essentially. And sometimes they don't really get enough of this training when it comes to what is called psychoeducation. That's something like mental health first aid, where it helps them create this empathy so that they can connect with young people a bit better and maybe be able to identify some of these risk factors, some of these warning signs that young people may present.
So what can adults who take this training do to help the youth in their life?
So the training that we offer has what is essentially an action plan. So with CPR, you have a strategy that you use to essentially give chest compressions, resuscitation to keep somebody alive. In the same way that you do that, there are mental health strategies that you can use. And one of those is being able to assess for risk of suicide or harm, make sure that you're listening non-judgmentally, knowing the difference between giving advice versus being reassuring, and being able to know what kind of services are available in your area, whether they're mental health services, social services, or medical services.
Who do you think would likely take this class and most likely benefit from it too?
Honestly, I think the people that would benefit most from it, aside from the workforces that I just mentioned, I would say that family members, parents could benefit from this a lot, but also young people could benefit from this probably more so than any other group, because if you do you talk to your parents a lot?
Frankly, no, not quite.
But you talk to your friends
I talk
quite
to
a
friends.
bit.
I have friends.
Yeah, you probably are more honest with your friends than your family. I'm making a generalization, but I believe that is true for a lot of individuals. So if your friends have a more accurate perception of what you are, they have an accurate photograph of maybe what you're struggling with, they would probably be more likely to identify some of these warning signs and be able to either alert an adult if they feel like that it rises to the level where they're worried about your health, or they might be able to just sit and listen to you. Again, it's like it's a lot like physical health. So not everything requires a trip to the hospital, right? Sometimes you just need a Band-Aid, and if somebody can offer you that lifeline, that Band-Aid in that time, it might keep you from getting an infection. It might keep it from developing into something worse. So I believe young people could probably benefit the most from this.
So the question that probably everyone who is watching this has on their mind, are the classes free?
Yeah, the classes are definitely free. Like I said, this is all grant funded, so it is a bit of a long course. It's about 8 hours long, so it certainly is time consuming, but in the long run, it's definitely beneficial to take, and all the materials are provided for free. You get a 200-page manual that comes with it, so it's got a lot of information that comes with that training.
So when are you holding these trainings, and where will they take place?
So we have grant funding secured until September 2021. The next trainings that we have that are in Ulster County are at, I believe, Family of Woodstock in February. We have one in Kingston at the Department of Mental Health. We'd like to do some more down in this area, in Wawarsing and Ellenville area as well. So we're looking into that too, and perhaps we'll probably do one at the library before spring really gets going.
So how does someone get in touch with you if they want to know more about this?
Sure. So I work for HealthAlliance. I work at the Marys Avenue campus. So if you just call the HealthAlliance Hospital, the operator will be able to connect you to me, or you can reach out to hahv.org/MHAT, which stands for Mental Health Awareness Trainings. So those are the two ways that are probably the easiest to get my contact information. And we are more than able to host these trainings for individuals or groups in the community as well. We basically just need a group of at least 5 individuals, and we can run a class anywhere as long as there's space available.
So is there anything else you wanted to mention or add?
Sure. Yeah, I think we've got a little bit of time left, so I'm not sure if we can take a look at this graph up here. So I just wanted to bring a couple statistics and just make sure that everybody is aware of the impact that mental health has on young people in particular. So we have up here youth mental health at school. So for young people in particular, suicide is the second leading cause of death for anywhere between the ages of 10 to 24, and that's really only superseded by accidents. When it comes to the prevalence of something like this, 1 in 5 school-aged young folks will be affected by some type of mental illness, and that could be something as severe as a mental disorder, a disability, or just something that is a condition. And again, we talked about the variability of those. So that is some of the stats from this graph. I'm not sure if we can pull up some of the other statistics here. So when it comes to mental health issues, it's changing as far as who is being affected by these as well. So as we look on this graph, this is urban to rural, and as time has progressed, it seems like rural areas are more affected by some of these mental health challenges. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and one of those can be certainly the access that you have. If you're living in an area that it takes 30 minutes to an hour to drive to the nearest hospital or mental health facility, that certainly is a barrier. Socioeconomics come into play as well, but it certainly is on the rise. So this is something, this in particular, this graph is measuring suicide rate, and you can see that even since 1999, where it was certainly a little bit greater in some of these rural areas, it's almost doubled now for rural areas compared to urban areas, and that certainly has a lot to deal with access to mental health services. And I don't know if we have another graph up here.
Oh.
Yeah, so this is just the leading cause of death amongst most age groups here, and in the dark green we have suicide rates for most of our individuals throughout life, all the way up into your 60s. It's in the top 10 for leading causes of death, but one of the most I guess alarming things certainly is that suicide is the second leading cause of death amongst young people all the way up to 34 years of age. So it's certainly something that is concerning, and we believe is preventable as far as accidents happen. You can't really always prevent those, but suicide is certainly something that we work hard to prevent overall. So I think that's about it. I'm sure I have some more information, but that pretty much covers most of the statistics that I wanted to share with you guys today. So thank you for letting me do that.
So sounds great. So if you guys want more information on today's topic, you can contact Adam by emailing adam.billingslea@hahv.org or by calling 845-334-4959. So thank you for joining us today on Spotlight on Wawarsing.
Thanks for having me, F.
And we'll see you next time.